don't usually use Sublime, so you'll have to forgive me. Okay. Yeah, thanks. So I've just created a real basic application, and sorry? I'll show you how I did that if you like. I'm also using Bash, which I don't use, so I really don't know where I am. Hey? My computer is highly customized towards my energetic style of coding. So once you install RubyMotion, you'll get access to this. You probably can't see that very well. Is this full screen, Jack? You can see it? Alright. So you can see there when you install RubyMotion, you'll get this motion command. And then you'll be able to do different kind of account management and stuff like that. But the main one is that you'll be able to run motion create. And this is what will start off your iOS or your OS 10 app. And the way you do that is through the use of templates. So there's a different template for iOS and there's a different template for OS 10. And basically this is just like a little bit of boilerplate just to get you going. So it's kind of like, it's not like Rails new where it writes the app for you. It's like, you know, creates a very basic folder structure, creates your app delegate, puts your gem file in, just little things like that. So what you end up with is something very similar to this, minus the build folder there. So resources folder, some spec folders, gem file, gem lock, rake file, all things like that. So we'll start with the rake file. Rake file is kind of where you do a lot of your project configuration. So you have things like the app name, you can put in your bundle identifier. So for those that don't know, a bundle identifier is kind of like it's a reverse domain, so it'll be com.something.something, and it's kind of how Apple identify your app through like one of 7 different IDs and stuff. So for each app you'll have an individual one. And you can see the different, if I can get back into my app. Where did I put it? I actually put it in one of your other apps. Okay, so if you run rake config, you'll be able to kind of see all those different options that you can set through the rake file. And this is one of the real beauties of RubyMotion because it uses rake to run different tasks and to manage itself and to run builds and stuff like that. So it's really familiar to anyone who's used Ruby, and you can write your own tasks really easily and things like that. So it's actually really good. So at this point, if we wanted to just build this app, we can just run rake build, and then RubyMotion is going to take the code and compile. Yep. Sure is. Where is it?
You'll be a rake simulator.
Oh yeah, that's the one I want. Yeah. Really? So if you run just rake, I've been doing Mac OS, it's the same, so that's not even an excuse. So when you run that app, it's going to build it, it's going to throw it into the simulator and then run it, right? So we've got an error somewhere here, but that doesn't matter. And then basically it stores your apps, and it's very similar to an iPhone. There are a couple of like little caveats. It doesn't have Bluetooth, so there's no Bluetooth interaction. You have really limited like social networking and things like that on there. You don't have things like messages either. So a lot of the time you'll be running it on your device if you want to test those types of things. If you're doing anything, yeah. So let me just have a look at this error. So once you've kind of set up your app, and this is really all you need to get going, and then you'll want to go back to your app delegate. And this is, everything minus this is created by default when you run that first motion task. And then I've put this in. So basically this is just some Cocoa calls to kind of set up our initial window. So we pass in the UI screen and then we grab the main screen and we give it the bounds. So this could be, like for an iPhone, the main screen is going to be iPhone size. For an iPad, it's going to be iPad size. If you're pushing out to a TV, right, through Apple TV or through plugging in, then that's going to be a different size. So you use that to kind of set up your main window, which you're going to display your views in. So if you think of it like Rails, this is like you're setting up your computer screen, I guess, or your browser, right? And then you set your root view controller. So this is the view controller with which your app is going to launch into. So this might be your initial table view, or like an activity view. So if you think about when you boot up Instagram, that first view is like the scroll view. That would be their root view controller. And then we tell that root view controller that we're going to make it key and we're going to make it visible. So it's going to be the key controller and we're going to make that visible. We're going to make the window visible to the viewer on the iPhone. And then from this method you have to return true. I believe it just lets the phone know it's booted or ready to go. So that's that, and I've created a view controller and I've just popped that in app. And you can kind of put these wherever you want. Everyone will have differing opinions on how they want to structure their app. I'm not going to try and dictate to anyone here. The other thing that I noticed about RubyMotion versus something like Rails is that because there are no kind of expectations of what you call your files or anything like that, I can call this view controller but still have this call it view, which can kind of get a little bit confusing if you let that get out of hand. So I could call this whatever I want. I could call it like Purple Monkey Dishwasher, and then Rails would look for the class rather than the actual, RubyMotion will look for the class rather than the file itself. So if I run this now, it should work, and then it'll load into the view. So the reason it crashed before was that I had the view class when it was actually supposed to be view controller. So it'll just show a blank black screen to begin with. Nope. So let me just have a look at this error. Nope. Oh yeah, okay, so I went ahead and created some methods here and forgot to call super in them. I don't even want this method, to be honest. So if I run that again, then we'll get a black screen, okay? Yeah, shoot, go for it, please, for the love of God.
Specifically for our app, like I've looked into the next code a little bit, and we're doing a PLE project, so you pretty much can't test anything with Simulator.
Yeah.
Can, like, the next code you can just like build and it'll launch on the app and then you can debug? Yeah.
You can say, find me the main front of the window, find me the view controller, find me the individual view, find me the subview.
So if I press Control and hover over the view,
Yeah, okay, so
you can debug as you go. Yeah. And with RubyMotion 3.0, they've got a live reload thing now. So you can change like some attributes of a view and then the view will refresh and things like that, yeah. But there's ways to debug.
Yeah, I've used IRB before, so I just
And I think there's like, yeah, and I think there's limited REPL on the iPhone. I don't know. I've never really tried it. But you can. Okay, but it'll show if it crashes. Like a binding.pry. The beta is early July. Okay, so I've got a viewDidLoad method. So there's a couple of different little like view callbacks.
I don't have dash and alpha. Control space.
What?
No, control space.
Control space.
Yeah.
I do not like these new docs. I just want to show these. So these are like little callbacks. So when a view loads, iOS relies fairly heavily on different callbacks that you can kind of hook into, so delegate methods. So you've got things like viewDidLoad, viewWillLoad, and you can do different things in these depending on what you want to do. It's really, I mean, there's nothing that says you can't do everything in viewDidLoad, but it's really not recommended. You kind of want to split it out across. I'm sure Jack could go into more detail about where to do appropriate stuff. Yeah. So the main important thing to remember though is that you use super in these methods. Because we're overriding existing delegate methods, if you don't call super, things will crash like they did previously. So for something like a viewDidLoad where we're building the view in, you want super at the top. If you were to do something like viewDidDisappear, animated true, animated, then you want to call super after you've done your other stuff, right? That's something I do anyway. So what you can do here is we can start setting attributes on this view. So because this is a view controller, it's not actually a view in itself, but it does create a view when you create a view controller. So it manages a view. So here I can access the view through the view attribute, and then I can go background color equals UI color dot white color. So I'm going to go with something simple. You can do things like yellow, red, kind of whatever. You can't go like tangerine, summer red or something like that because it doesn't have it, but you can then use hex codes. Maybe you can. Maybe you can use Bondi Blue. Yeah. So then if I run rake, yeah. So then we get this white view, right? So through just a, oh, it's the projector. It's just crappy. Yeah, thanks. So then we get a basic white view. Little code already done. We're not using any interface builder or anything like that because you kind of don't need to. So then what we can do is in our app delegate, right? So navigation controllers are really popular. So I think I've got one back here, and then I can just reload my view controller, and I'll tell you all about this other code in between this. Get rid of that. Yeah. So if you're just doing allocate.init or alloc.init, you can use new just in place of that. Yeah. But if you're doing something like if I was to do alloc and then init with frame, then I would have to call that method because it's a method. I always tend to use alloc.init anyway, just out of habit. Call me crazy. So basically what I've done here is I've created a UI navigation controller, and then using the root view controller, and then I pass it in that view controller again, right? Does anyone have any questions about where we're up to so far?
The root view controller is that controller you specified initially as
So
like the controller alone.
We kind of got like two controllers now, so this is a bit of like Inception. So we've got the window, and then I set the window root view controller to be a navigation controller, and then for the root view of the navigation controller, I set the view controller. So the navigation controller wraps the view controller. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's not really relevant. Like,
There's kind of two of those ones on it. There's one conventional and then there's I say, I qualified it.
So now I can access the navigation controller and then set the title. That's it. So now we get access to different little attributes as well, right, that we can set. So when you add it to a UI navigation controller, you can do things like set.title, right? And if I make this cloud, then what's going to happen is the navigation controller is going to use that to set it for the bar up the top. So now if I exit and then do rake for build, okay. Okay, so then we get cloud up the top as the navigation controller thing. So we're really not doing very much code here, and most of this is really just boilerplate at this point. But now we can start adding on different views. So if I was to go ahead and create another view and say class, I'm going to call this push view, and that'll make sense in a second. UI view controller. And then I'm just doing the same thing. This is a view controller. Yeah, like I said, this is a demonstration of how not to name files. So if we're doing this, that's exactly like the heckling. I can take the heckle. Okay, so again, call super in here. I'm going to set the title. No, it's not, Garrett. What do you mean? It's the right file. Okay, so if I rake, it'll do nothing, so I'm not going to do that yet. So then I can set the background color again. So background color, UI color dot, and this one I'll make red. Nah, that's too shining. Let's go with the yellow. So everything is really Americanized as well. So if I was to rake this, it would do nothing at this point, because what I really want to do is, the effect that I'm going for here is to kind of show how you can push and pop views off a view controller really easily, because that's something you'll do quite often. Or even present a modal view. So if I was to do this, I would create a button now, which would be done through the navigation item. If you see me do this wrong, shout out, because these are crazy things. So it's navigation item dot right button. What? Oh no, I want to create a navigation item and then set it onto the navigation controller.
Yeah, it is right bar button item. But remember, it's the UI bar button item, not a UI button. Oh yeah, that's he's what I prepared. He's what I prepared.
So this is what I've got now. I'm just going to clean this up, Jack, because single quotes are the devil. Ooh, controversy. So So basically what this is doing, I'm creating a right bar button item. So I'm accessing the navigation item of the view controller. So say like I'm going to assign a navigation item, right bar button item is what I'm assigning here. So it has two, there's left bar button item and right bar button item. Sorry. And then yeah, you can do items. You can go item crazy if you want. And then I've got UI bar button item dot alloc dot init with bar button system item. And then here I've used UI bar button system item save. Sorry, I know if you've done Ruby, this is not very descriptive at all. But basically there are system buttons that are predefined by constants within the framework itself, so through Cocoa. And this is going to tell it this is a save button. You can create your own buttons. Really all it does is, I think it's going to put save up the top or something like that. Yeah. So that's all it does. So it's got certain styles about it, and that's to keep consistency. And I think it probably helps when you're thinking about accessibility as well, because then you can say this is a save button. So where possible, use these, and then when they ship iOS 10, and you don't have to go back and update all your app because you've used convention. Sorry? Yeah, you just got to update everything else. But you'll see that button and smile. But you can go ahead and you can go crazy and you can create your own buttons as well. So target, there's this thing of like, Cocoa is really delegate. So you can say like, I want this, when I tap this button, target is going to be self, so being this view object, But you can set that to a delegate controller. So you might have like a different class that then responds to these events, right? A lot of the time you'll just see self. If it's a very small thing, it's not worth creating a whole new class over or a whole new object, you'll see self. And then action is kind of like the method that you want to call. So it's almost meta-programming, where you can imagine that this would do like .send on itself, and then it would call this. And then by doing the little colon here, we're passing along the object or the event kind of that the notification came from to that method. Yeah, right. Ching, 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 ching. Yeah. So if you want the object, then you want that colon. No, you don't. I mean, like here, right? We don't need it. Why? Yeah. It won't get called. Oh, right, but I'm not going to give it any arguments. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. So that's an important thing. In RubyMotion you have, like with Ruby 2 I think it was, they brought out name parameters. This is all about name parameters. So like done sender is a completely different method to done. And if I, like Matt was saying, if I did that, it's going to call this one. If I do this, it's going to call this one. Oh, yeah. Parmigiana. Yep. Yeah. So you can
have a done method, a done sender with param, and a done sender. You can have three methods and they will all be called.
They're all called done. Yeah. And it's not going to give you like a call done with one argument when expected 0.
seen that before.
really
Yeah,
wacky
in
name.
Vector 6.
Yeah. So
Yeah, so technically that done method you want to call cat on the same time. Totally politically correct.
yeah, exactly.
So then I can go, so I'll show you what that looks like. What is it, Jack? All by myself. Does it do anything?
It's really big now, though.
I can't even.
Earlier it was really slowly.
You foiled me. Yeah. So with any luck that will load. And then we've got a nice little save button. If I click that, nothing will happen, right? But it is hitting that done method. So then if I go into here, into Sublime, and then in here I can go puts done, and then I run that again. So when I hit save now, it's going to put done, 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 done. No, there's no like binding.pry. Is that what you kind of mean?
Yeah, I thought like you put debugger on. Instead of putting like the log section under debugger. So I'll get to that line and be like, I can have the variable.
No.
Yeah.
Or even in Ruby, right?
Yeah.
On that line, back towards the other.
Compiled.
Yeah, okay. But you can open Xcode at that point.
No, so it's still in the terminal. But you can break the mode.
I've looked at the Xcode debugger in Ruby. I just wanted to throw in like Xcode. Because I want you to break my own variable. Can you show us how you would get?
Nah, I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's like. Yeah. I'll show you what it looks like, right?
So just like log everything.
Yeah, kind of.
What is it? Debugger?
Usually if you get something. So really don't use a real-time debugger. The rest of those work together. You got a problem.
If anyone's done
Xcode is actually quite a little bit. It just means that you can set the breakpoints to the UI. Everything else is
But I was specifically. But I was like using it the other day because I wanted to